Hello there, my name is Harry, and I live in the United Kingdom, the country that didn't get Disney Plus until the very last moment. Seriously, what is up with that? The Incredibles 2 came out here a month after the US release, we got Coco 2 months after everyone else, and then Disney Plus comes to the UK 4 months after practically every other English-speaking country in the world. If there was a way to encourage people to pirate Disney products, this is how you do it. Fortunately, I resisted the temptation and paid for the subscription when it finally came to the UK, like the good little Disney shill that I am. The main appeal of this service, though, was watching their first Disney original titled The Mandalorian, the show in question for today's review. Was it worth waiting for? Is it as amazing as everybody says? All will be revealed as we go through each episode and see what all the fuss was about. The first story kicks the series off stunningly. We have a Western-inspired opening that almost everybody has seen before at some point, with an intimidating stranger walking into a bar with the patrons getting their comeuppance for treating an outsider with disdain. There's a slight twist on this opening, however, in that the perceived victim in this scenario has a bounty himself.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
This, accompanied by the unique way Mando dealt with one particular scumbag, shows a darker and more brutal side to Star Wars that has been sorely lacking since the Disney takeover. This was the first time Mando's droid superstition was brought up, an idea that resonated throughout the series to a stunning degree. The pair got into his ship and my god, that ice monster looked so good! As impressive as the beast appeared, it was no match for Mando's taser. Having Mando permanently wearing his helmet was a very interesting concept. His individual identity and emotions are therefore shrouded in mystery. This is the perfect way to entice people to watch more, which I'm sure has had that effect on the majority of the audience. Initially, Mando is also a man of little words, which makes the sequence in his ship with this blue guy very entertaining. This chatterbox is probably making Mando regret not killing him and just carrying his corpse to whoever wants it. Going into this story, you, like I, may have began to wonder about when exactly it is set, and thankfully very few details are actually given at first. A quick Google search will tell you that the story is set 5 years after the Battle of Endor and miraculously has little to do with the dreaded Disney trilogy. This opening sets up the life of the bounty hunter, filled with danger and moral conundrums. Reminiscent of the Witcher series, another fictional character who is shrouded in mystery and gets paid, cash in hand, for sorting out local troubles. This distinction between a bounty hunter and a mercenary makes for an interesting protagonist, especially watching him use his attained wealth to upgrade himself and make him a more proficient warrior. Just as a little side note, I'm a bit mixed about the music in this series, if I'm honest with you guys. I love the orchestral themes and motifs that float about. This is amazing. This is awesome. Everything that makes it feel tribal also works in the show's favor, especially when Mando rocks up to some desolate wasteland. Even the sound of metallic percussion adds to this theme of upgrading. This, however, is just a bit odd. It's composed and written well, maybe it's just the way it's mastered I take issue with. But what do I know? I can't even differentiate a clarinet from an oboe unless I can see the player. One of the other great aspects of this show is the casting. Pedro Pascal played one of my favourite characters in Game of Thrones and was fantastic in Narcos 2. I thought it was interesting to read that he voices the character all the time, but isn't necessarily inside the suit all the time. Bryce Dallas Howard, director of episode 4, stated that Pascal was rehearsing for King Lear on Broadway whilst they were shooting that particular episode. There are 2 double actors that inhabit the suit alongside Pascal, but he was a good choice all the same. When Mando reaches Navarro, home of the Bounty Hunter Guild, we meet the leader, Greef Karga. At first I thought they were shoehorning in Lando Calrissian, but then I realised
you are Carl Weathers, the actor.
It was surprising to see Werner Herzog thrown into the mix too. Last time I saw him acting was in Rick and Morty, but his appearance is very much welcome here too. His voice seems to send shivers down my spine.
Do yourself a favor when you're out in the countryside and you see chicken. Try to look a chicken in the eye with great intensity, and the intensity of stupidity that is looking back at you is just amazing.
And of course, Taika Waititi voicing IG-11 was just downright perfect. Going into this, I was aware that he would be directing an episode, so it's unsurprising he would be voicing a CGI character from another one of Disney's biggest franchises. Anyway, Mando travels to Mars where he spots some strange alien monsters on the prowl. There was a reference to the original Star Wars here. Instead of being surprised by Tusken Raiders, a blurg jumps up in front of Mando's scope and attacks him. Like the gigantic ice monster that bit Mando's ship earlier, these beasts look very realistic for modern CGI standards. I'd be okay with this moment if there wasn't this big open shot of flat ground right beforehand, where he surely would have seen the damn thing coming. He is then rescued by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kuiil. His role is to educate Mando in the ways of the blurg riding and die a horrible tragic death later on. This concept of Mandalorians taming wild beasts interested me though. It's a shame we don't really get more of that in any of the later episodes. Mando does kill a beast in episode 2, but I'm hopeful that season 2 will develop this idea further. Maybe I just want to see him riding atop a majestic horse on the southern beaches of France. What is meant to be taken from this sequence though is that our protagonist, like the audience, still has much to learn about his skills and history as a Mandalorian. The audience and Mando are encouraged to pay attention to Kuiil with his perfect catchphrase, "I have spoken." Mando then arrives at the point of interest, but IG-11 comes along to absolutely and efficiently destroy whoever's kicking about. This character is just sublime, putting every single Clone Wars era droid to shame. Knowing that this point in the story is post-Empire, it's no surprise that droids have become this powerful, with the Jedi no longer being an obstacle for them in combat. With the fighting escalating as more reinforcements arrived, the most badass part for me was when Mando jumped on that turret and just annihilated everyone. The whole episode is paced wonderfully too, when you consider that it begins and ends with action sequences, and everything in between retains its intensity and drive. This whole final sequence is filmed amazingly, and Mando's distrust towards droids came to fruition when it was about to kill the child. We can speculate all day long as to whether this is Baby Yoda or not, but my suspicion is that it's not Yoda. Herzog claimed that the being is 50 years old, which would mean that it was born before Yoda died. The only reason it's called the child is because we genuinely have no idea what species this creature is, or the planet of its origin. And it's just so flipping cute! All the violence, brutality, moody tones, and outright murder. It's a very welcome and warming sight, ending the episode on an amazing cliffhanger. I know this is a relatively minor aspect of this show, but the opening sequence that starts off these episodes is pretty great. Instead of relying on old school wads of text slowly scrolling up the screen, we get this gradual ascension of music, the legacy of Star Wars flashing before our eyes, using the flashing reds and blues on these headpieces, culminating into the yellow uses all the primary colours for a fantastic effect. Unfortunately, we are reminded of the crappy Disney additions to the canon like BB-8 and Kylo Ren, but it's still stylistically interesting. Despite depending on a pre-established series, the show can stand on its own 2 feet. It never fails to hype me up for another episode. Anyway, the baby was the cutest little thing until he turned into a Frenchman, and there was a really nice build-up of tension as Mando made his way back to his ship. The way the music stops and we see these shadows of flying creatures both on the rocks and reflected in Mando's helmet really intensified the moment before he got attacked by bounty hunters. It's commendable just how little dialogue there is in this episode too. The images really speak for themselves. Seeing the Jawas tearing apart Mando's ship and watching him so apathetically disintegrate them from a distance. The episode wastes no time getting itself into 5th gear. From the fight beforehand, it would appear that he would only use this blaster if he really needed to, but now that his ride home has been dismantled, the chase is on. I never thought I wanted a Jawa action sequence, but we sure as hell got one, and it's awesome. Mando climbing this humongous tank and getting bombarded with rubbish was fun as heck. The Jawas appearing so harmless from a distance, but the moment they had Mando surrounded, after all that climbing and effort, all ended up being for nothing. It's so brilliant. We're so used to Jedi protagonists getting their way because of their mind-bending abilities and powerful lightsabers. To see a protagonist with limitations is refreshing in this universe. force. The next lesson for Mando is that doing things by force may not be the best way to get what he wants. This leads to some diplomacy with the Jawas. This was so enjoyable. Language barriers, sheer anger, and finally cramming him into the cockpit of the tank. Perfection. The fight with the Mudhorn is also a mountain of goodness. Mando's torch attachment may look cool, but it gives us this horrific POV shot of mud and straw that has a bright and colourful eye opening in the midst of it. This is certainly not an original technique, but it does the job at producing a synecdoche of the beast before we see it entirely outside of the cave. After Mando gets thrown, the sound design is just... it's from the soundtrack, but it honestly sounds like a sound effect. I feel bad complaining about the electronic elements now because it complements the rolling around in the mud that takes place. With all his equipment jamming, Mando is brought to his lowest, but saved by the baby. Just seeing this humongous beast suspended in air, the guitar plucking, slowly evolving into the theme, Mando caked in mud, it's truly epic. The cherry on the cake being the Suga is just a delicacy to the Jawas. What he went through to get that, and then seeing it destroyed and consumed in seconds was applause-worthy. Mando flies away to get his reward after a mechanical montage, and I honestly thought it was nice having this little detour in between the main story that was built up in episode 1. One more thing I will mention before we go on to the next episode is that these concept arts are perfect for the credits. They will make a fine addition to my PC desktop backgrounds. So the child is still adorable to the max, and the decision to make it a puppet was undeniably the right one. The adorableness makes his temporary departure that much more saddening for Mando, and by extension the viewer. They both saved each other's necks, and now Mando is back to square one. A lot of what takes place from here mirrors the first episode, but just expands slightly where it can. Herzog basically says to Mando, there's more where that came from, and we get to see that the whole Mandalorian clan is hiding out on Navarro too. I thought I'd also share one very interesting piece of trivia with you guys here. So Jon Favreau, known to his friends as Chef, wrote the majority of Mandalorian episodes. He also has one voice role in the entire show, and it's this guy right here named Paz Vizsla. Now, this name might not mean anything to somebody who hasn't watched the Clone Wars TV show, because Favreau also voiced a pivotal character in that show who was also Mandalorian, and that character's name was Pre Vizsla. This is a great example of the show rewarding fans who paid special attention to production credits and the lore relating to Mandalore that was explored in the Clone Wars. I'm just saddened they didn't call this guy Post Vizsla. I love this scene though. On one hand, it pulls the curtain back a little more on the Creed in almost religious fashion, but with the other, it doesn't give away too much. Foundlings, the Great Purge, elements that are still surrounded in mystery. They're saying,
"This is the way."
This is the way.
Is not just a statement of fact, it's a warning to the viewer to be patient. All will be revealed in time. The armorer then gives Mando his Chekhov's gun called Whistling Birds, and the music blasts out a more dramatic rendition of the Mandalorian motif during this crafting montage. The whole thing is just absolutely stunning. For once, super battle droids aren't just these harmless cartoony objects for the Jedi to carve up, but are at the root of our protagonist's mistrust towards droids. Then we see the armor in its full glory. I can't handle the badassness right here. There's the tiniest reference to Empire Strikes Back here too.
Not one of them closed the deal. Only you, Mando. Only you.
Ichuta. Nice to see a familiar face. Ichuta. How rude.
Karga seems to be more inclined towards rewarding Mando with gifts and holidays, but he just wants his next job, evidently unable to rest his body or mind. Then, reminded of the only real responsibility he may have ever had, he decides to rescue the child. He will have to encounter all the people he's just gotten away from all over again, and more than likely kill them, but so be it. This urge to rescue the child stems from what we would later find out about the Foundlings and their relationship with of the Mandalorians. Themes of parenting and fatherhood certainly start to become apparent at this point. I really liked the way this rescue sequence was lit. The dusty darkness and the flashes of blasters enforce this idea of Mando being practically invisible to most in the dark, for his armor would reflect a lot of light had they been on. This is why when the troopers put their torches on, the intensity increases and the sounds of the buffeting and violence are really sharp on the ears. Mando gets held at gunpoint once again by 4 troopers, reminding me of that line from the very first episode.
I like those odds.
And then whistling birds come to the rescue. This sequence does beg the question of what exactly were they doing with the child? Nothing is really explained when Mando questions Dr. Pershing. The only clue we get is when Mando is listening to the conversation with Herzog. Something about extracting something from the child? Who knows? If they keep up the quality in season 2, I'm sure we'll get an answer at some point. Throughout the segment, you begin to get the feeling that there will be repercussions for this theft of Imperial property, followed up by this amazing shot of all the bounty hunters getting pinged on Discord simultaneously. It's almost like they knew this would happen. That one slip from Mando asking Herzog what they planned on doing with the child is now gonna cost him severely. And then the great conclusive standoff begins. Greef doesn't even address the child, merely calling it the package, and referencing the original Star Wars by claiming he's Mando's only hope. I just find it amazing how quickly Mando was able to essentially flip into his speeder, providing cover for him whilst everyone else is out in the open. The escalation continues when we see this marvelous close-up on Mando's gun, incinerating bounty hunters left and right to prove he's serious. The ideological conflict between the 2 guilds he's a part of have brewed this conflict to boiling point. Both have creeds that are falling apart due to the haunting spirit of the Empire. Then they fight with extravagance, the Mandalorians seemingly coming out of the woodwork to rescue one of their own. There will always be infighting, but fundamentally they look out for their own. Post Vizsla just unloading rounds into everyone looked awesome. To top everything off, Mando pulls a fast one on Karga, and seeing him saved by the Beskar was just the perfect note to end on. This episode definitely stands out for being a little different. The child is cute as always, but this is the most marketable I think I've seen the child puppet. Coming soon to Disneyland, the Marshy Village from The Mandalorian. Have a cup of spotchka with Baby Yoda for only $49.99. Mando meets up with a friend of his. I have to commend the episode for not holding back on having Mando fight her. He full on punches her in the face multiple times, with the pair rolling around in the dirt, leading to the perfect stalemate. It concluded perfectly too, with the child standing and watching the whole thing, sipping on the soup that Mando then offers her. When they return to the feeding ground, she waffles a load of stuff about the Battle of Endor and walks away, basically telling Mando to jog on. Thankfully, a bunch of farmers come along to ask him for a favor. This was a good little segment, showing that he's not desperate for work, but sympathetic enough to take on the job, and even manipulating their desperation to help him move some cargo. The pair get settled into the village, and this mother character is charged with housing Mando. She tries to take off his helmet, wink wink, and then he proceeds to take off his helmet right in front of everyone. Had there been blinds in the way or something, this would have made for a much nicer moment. Maybe this is more of a statement of how relaxed Mando is here. He gets plenty of that through needless dialogue after the battle's won, but apparently the reason they don't see him with his helmet on is because they're distracted by "Oh, Baby Yoda! Coochie coochie goo!" After using his Witcher sensors to follow some tracks, we get to the worst part of the episode. The remainder of the conflict is literally a carbon copy of the Bounty Hunters episode from the Clone Wars series. For those of you that haven't seen it, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and his Padawan Ahsoka Tano find a farming village on a remote planet. The farmers hire bounty hunters to stop pirates raiding their village, and the villagers are left better off after their victory against the bullies. It is honestly one of the most forgettable episodes, but had I not watched the whole thing in its entirety, this probably wouldn't have bothered me so much. But it's so obvious, and with Dave Filoni involved in production of both shows, they should know better than to pull these type of stunts.
But there are only 2 of us.
There are only 4 of them.
You took the job.
Why are we paying bounty hunters to defend us if we are just going to end up doing it ourselves?
You cannot fight that thing.
Unless we show them how.
That's it. We'll just train the villagers to defend themselves.
Okay. Who knows how to shoot?
What?
And then the ex-shock trooper has this montage of teaching people how to wield sticks. She even does the foot stance correction thing. After the pair blow up the famous luminous blue alcohol vats, they come face to face with the Imperial Walker. It would have been nice to have some explanation why the cockpit is all red, but it was suggested to me that it might be representative of the spirit of the Empire still haunting the galaxy more than anything else. We never find out who is driving it either, which is disappointing, but it's not like any of the raiders get any development, so I don't really care either way. There's this lovely wide angle of the defenses and the ATST that stuck out to me here though, when they subsequently fight and inevitably win. There's nothing more notable about the fight itself, just that it was cool to see this fight taking place at night, making all the blasts and explosions that tad more visually interesting. I think the issue with this episode is how black and white it is. I'll grant them that it was nice to have some time when Mando isn't surrounded by people who wanted to kill him, but simultaneously it feels like the morally grey stuff is just put aside so we can have an episode where the bad characters and the good characters are very plainly established. Episodes 1 to 3 are like their own contained arc, with people and clans having mysterious motivations, and then we move to the next phase of the story, flying around space doing odd fillery jobs. It's stupid for me to expect perfection from every single episode, but when the bar is set so high, it's disappointing to tread through episodes that really wouldn't have mattered if they never happened. Mando gets a lot of dialogue in this story, which works in learning more about him. He yearns for the child to have a place of sanctuary.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
And that he too could have a normal life here. It's an interesting dilemma for the character, but for me it didn't feel timed well, having it thrown into the middle of the season here. There's more space adventures to come that we know he will be involved in, so maybe if this episode came later it might have packed a harder punch for me. That feeling of inevitable pursuit comes in the form of another bounty hunter who's about to snipe the child. This wouldn't have been too bad had they not used the same wrong blaster twist they pulled at the end of episode 1. IG-11 got this close to killing the child, we heard a blast, only to find it was the shooter that got shot by somebody else. It made me groan a little, but hey, it's certainly not the worst thing that could have happened. They could have given that child actor dialogue and made her fight or something stupid like that. The children were actually handled well in this episode. The daughter clinging to the mum and them all getting disgusted at the frog eating stuff was grand. But don't forget to buy your child that Baby Yoda plush from your local retailer. So, did it suck? So far so good, is how I'll answer the question. Mandalorian definitely gets off on the right foot, but there's even more glory to discuss when I pick apart the rest of the series in the upcoming Part 2 review, so subscribe to the channel. I'll definitely have this show wrapped up by the end of the month. What do you think of these first 4 episodes? Let me know in the comments below, or join us for a Benny on the Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion.